I'm with Munther Isaac from Bethlehem Bible College, and we're talking about Donald Trump's peace deal, the deal of the century. Munther, what are Palestinians on the street saying about Donald Trump's deal?
Well, first of all, let's not call it a peace deal, because we don't see it as a peace deal. Palestinians on the streets completely reject the deal. No one actually had high hopes to begin with, because the deal was it was built without consultation, without listening to the Palestinian perspective. So it's heavily one-sided, and it did not take into account the even basic needs and demands of the Palestinian people, which is simply applying the international law and keeping in line with the international law. So by and large, the Palestinian community is very suspicious of anything that's coming from the current American administration, and the deal was doomed to fail even before it was announced.
What do you feel about it as a Palestinian Christian? You're a pastor here in Bethlehem.
Well, the deal to begin with ignores the basic human rights of Palestinians. It does not look at Palestinians as equal to Israelis. And so it's basically, to understand how we feel about it as Christian leaders, we have to explain first how we see it and what it is in reality. It's basically putting Palestinians in gated communities, blocks, where every, discontinuous lands, for example, the Bethlehem block, the Hebron block, the Ramallah block, all gated with gates that are controlled by Israel, and the roads in between them are controlled by Israel as well. To know how Palestinian Christians think of the deal and why we reject it, it's important to understand what the deal actually proposes. And if you read closely and if you look at the maps, it's basically what I can call a gated community. It's not a Palestinian state, but putting Palestinians in blocks that are controlled. We don't have continuity. We don't have borders with the outside world. Everything is controlled by Israel. Even leaving one city to the other means we have to go through roads that are controlled by Israel. There are no guarantees in the deal. Everything is dependent on whether, quote unquote, we behave well. So it's very inhumane, if you wish, in how it treats Palestinians. And so in reality, the deal is a new apartheid, if you wish, where you put Palestinians in these big blocks, big communities, and control them, control their movement in and out. That's not state, that's not giving the people the dignity they deserve. And that's certainly not what Palestinians have been fighting for and seeking for the last 70 so years. So it's no surprise that the deal was rejected. And if you think of the land portion, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and let's keep in mind that the West Bank includes East Jerusalem, which is what we call the 67 borders, is a mere 22% of historical Palestine. And now we're not even getting that. So now the proposal is to confiscate or annex a big portion of the 22%. So what's going to be left for the Palestinians is really very, very little for the 5 million Palestinians who live under the Palestinian Authority. So this is going to further make the lives of Palestinians more difficult, I'm afraid.
You say you're going to get less land. Nothing's really happened over the last 70 years. So is any deal better than nothing?
I don't see it this way. I don't see it as any deal is and certainly the Palestinians don't see it this way, because first of all, let's understand that a big part of the so-called deal of the century is already being implemented by Israel. Israel controls what is called Area C in the West Bank, which is the areas where they have full authority, military and so on, where we cannot build, where they build settlements. In other words, whether we accept the deal or don't accept the deal really is not going to stop Israel from imposing their will by force, backed by U.S. support in the West Bank. Palestinians accepting the deal, meaning giving legitimacy to these illegal actions of building settlements and annexing land. So I don't see that accepting this deal actually is better for the Palestinians. Nothing is really promised or guaranteed other than a virtual recognition of a virtual state, 5 years along the line, and no Palestinian leader would accept to give legitimacy by the Palestinians to such an action.
Will it actually create a Palestinian state in the future, or just an autonomy where they don't have certain rights and Israel will still control certain things?
What's proposed is not a state, is not a real state. What is proposed is it's really what's proposed is for the Palestinians to do the day-to-day administration of the daily lives of. So really, Israel envisions the Palestinian Authority to do the difficult work on Israel's behalf while they continue to control all the land with all its resources. As I said, what we see in the plan is apartheid, and they want the Palestinian Authority to be the police and to do the administration on behalf of Israel, and that's not acceptable. No one will accept that.
Is Jerusalem important to the Palestinians?
Jerusalem is very, very vital to the Palestinians, of course, to the Palestinian identity. Of course, it has a big religious importance and symbolism. And giving Jerusalem one identity, or making it, as in the plan, one unified Jewish Jerusalem, I think will create a big problem and is a denial of the rich history of Jerusalem. The position of the Christian leaders about Jerusalem has always stayed the same. Jerusalem should be shared by two peoples and three religions, and the current deal proposes that Jerusalem will be, entirely, controlled by one side, one people, one religious community, and that's not acceptable. So Jerusalem is very important, and my fear as a Christian leader, and the fear of many others, is that because of its religious symbolism, if more one-sided actions are taken by Israel to change the nature of Jerusalem, that will further complicate the situation. And hopefully not, but our fear is that it might lead to more violence because, many religious extremists will take advantage of this and say, look, you see, they're changing Jerusalem, and because of its symbolism, call for violent acts, which is certainly not, nobody wants to see this. So I think it's a very important issue to deal with Jerusalem in a respectful manner and in a very sensitive manner, and really respect its history, its diversity, and not impose one-sided measures on Jerusalem. And that, by the way, will even complicate the situation of the Christian community in Jerusalem as well. Yeah.
We've seen Donald Trump recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Do Palestinians feel that America isn't a fair broker for peace?
Of course. Nobody has... We felt this for a long time, but America kept saying, sometimes to the Palestinians what Palestinians wanted to hear, and to Israel what Israel wanted to hear, while allowing Israel to continue with its measures. I think that Trump just confirmed what most Palestinians have always felt, which is that America is not fair, and that America has an interest in this, and they are clear in their support and bias towards Israel. In fact, they don't hide their bias in supporting Israel, which they see as an ally and a partner and so on. And so we've always had suspicion, but these suspicions were now confirmed to the degree that it's safe to say no one trusts the Americans anymore, and that America lost its credibility among the Palestinians and among most Arabs, I would say. We should not be fooled by what we call the bromance between some Arab leaders today and the American government and the current American president, because on the street, most people don't share the same feelings or same, opinions that their leaders have towards Mr. Trump. So I would say that surely the American government today has no credibility in the minds of Palestinians for sure, and most Arabs.
Does the Palestinian Authority need to modernize? There are problems with the PA paying people in prison and incitement in the school books. Does it need to modernize?
The Palestinian Authority is not perfect, but all of these need to be dealt in a holistic manner. It's a package deal. What is considered, for example, incitement in school books really talks about occupation and about Palestinians' right to, as they are in the books, to resist the occupation, which is granted by the international law anyways. I'm not saying that, as Christians we want to see armed resistance or anything, but all of these needs to be seen in perspective. The Palestinian Authority is an occupied or, under occupation body. We're not a real state to be judged by the same standards that you judged a real state by. And so there are certainly things that in a perfect scenario needs to be addressed. things that the Palestinian Authority is doing, things related to bad administration, things related to even to corruption and so on. Because by and large, the Palestinian Authority is not perfect. But we need, again, to put things in context. This is not a state with sovereignty. This is a government that is fully, controlled by Israel. And so in the context of occupation, we need to address the bigger picture before we are able to judge the Palestinian Authority by these standards. And, the civil society today and many church leaders are working hard within the system of the Palestinian Authority to address many of these issues. For example, women's rights is an issue that many civil rights organizations and church-related organizations and church leaders have pushed for reformations in some of these laws. And the Palestinian Authority listened and changed some of its laws. The curriculum is currently in schools, is currently being revisited. I know this because I'm on one of the committees. Because there was discussion led by many civil organization movements as well. So it's not as if no one is monitoring the Palestinian Authority or no one is trying to make things better. And I'm happy to see that these efforts are done from the inside, from the civil society, not under pressure from donors or governments. But again, while, as I said, we're all part of this reformation process and we shouldn't be silent about it, and we are, let's put things in perspective. This is not a state that can, be measured or judged like other states. We're under occupation, and that's important to keep in mind.
Now, the Bible College is in Bethlehem. Do you think that Israel will annex Bethlehem, and what would that mean?
It doesn't look that Israel wants to annex Bethlehem, but they certainly will and have annexed a big portion of what we call the Bethlehem governance, the whole area of Bethlehem, not the city. Including a lot of land that belongs to Palestinian Christian families. And this would put the future of the Palestinian community in big danger, simply because now we have no viable future when it comes to natural growth. Visitors to Bethlehem will see how the wall is built just outside the neighborhoods. All the land outside of the three Christian major cities, Bethlehem, Beit Sahur, Beit Jala, most of the land have been confiscated, whether it's the Abu Ghneim mountain, which now has a settlement called in Hebrew Har Homa, or the Gilo area, which was built on land for Palestinian Christian families from Beit Jala and so on. The Kremzan Valley, Al Makhrur area near Beit Jala, all of this was lost. And we're talking about a huge amount of land that belonged to the Christian community here, which would have made create possibilities for natural expansion and growth by our communities. So now when you think of the future, 20, 30 years from now, a serious question will be made: where will we grow? Where will our children find place to build homes or to live in? And we're beginning to see the results of that through crowded cities, high-rise buildings and apartments, which is creating some environmental problems with cars in one place and creating traffic jams and so on, and that will cause again a serious threat to a viable, continuous Christian presence, Palestinian Christian presence, because as you know, the majority of Palestinian Christians in the Palestinian-controlled areas live in the Bethlehem area. So really, we're very, very concerned about this. And it seems no one's going to help us stop this. Israel has taken most of this land that I mentioned, and that's a very serious issue.
If Bethlehem was annexed, would that mean the Palestinian Authority would be out and Israeli government would sort of come in and they would be the financiers of Bethlehem?
That's not a proposal that has been proposed, because, in fact, under the current Israeli government, their best case scenario is to get rid of even Palestinians from their own states. So that's why they tossed the idea of exchanging, land swap, as they called it, whereas in reality it's not land swap, it's transferring hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who hold Israeli citizenship into the territory of Palestinian Authority, because they don't want any Palestinians in the Israeli state. So I don't see Israel trying to control the city of Bethlehem in itself. They just want all the land around it so that, we don't grow much, and so that they don't have to, worry about, in the minds of many Israeli politicians, we are a demographic threat. That's how they see us. And that's, again, if you read the Trump deal, part of it is this so-called land swap, whereas in reality it's not land swap, it's trying to get rid of Palestinian citizens of Israel and transferring them to the Palestinian Authority. So that scenario is not actually suggested.
Is this a worrying time for you, and do you fear that perhaps we'll see more and more Christians leaving the Bethlehem area?
Yes, it's very worrying for the Christian leaders and Christian community. We are witnessing a mass, gradual and slow, but with serious effects, immigration process of right now mainly young Palestinian Christians who can't find jobs, or who are tired of a life characterized or marked by long hours at checkpoints, or having to wait 2 to 3 years before you land a good job or any job at all, and very limited things to do here. And to go from Bethlehem to Ramallah, we have to go through checkpoints. Just imagine the scenario. And then they look outside, their relatives live outside with freedom and dignity, and they think, what are we doing here? So from a human perspective, it's hard to stop this unless there is a drastic change of the political situation here in Bethlehem. I'm serious. There hardly passes a month or even less without me as a pastor having a conversation with a family that's considering leaving. Last week I was speaking to a group of almost 60 young Palestinian Christians, all in university and working age. So most of them are aged 18 to 30. And I asked the question, who of you is considering or have considered leaving this land? And the vast majority raised their hands. And this is a reality because, again, it's simple, there's no quality of life here. You have to struggle so hard. And again, no matter how motivated you are and how ambitious you are, there comes a time when you're just so tired of waiting for checkpoints, or so tired for, there are so many things that happen that affect your soul here and lead you to despair and ultimately will lead people to leave. I can tell you one story after the other of, in my small church in Bethlehem, we have a family that's just struggling to keep their land because the land is located between 3 settlements, and they are fighting, ironically, in Israeli courts just to keep their land that they inherited and that they have been living in and farming for hundreds of years. I have a friend in church, a church member, whose wife is not from this country, a foreign spouse, and Israel didn't grant her the visa, so they had to leave. And it's these one setback after the other that caused people to despair and think, is there a future for us here? So it's a very, very serious concern that we have about our future as a Christian community, as part of the Palestinian people, which is, struggling under this life.
That must be really heartbreaking as a pastor, because the Christian community are the salt and the light here in Bethlehem, and this is where Jesus was born.
Yes, it would be, and I think this is something that should be of a concern for the global church, keeping a Christian presence in this land. And to the degree that we're seeing, the fact that we're not seeing so much energy and stress and attention from the global church towards this cause is very disheartening. You would find more Christians enthusiastic about a future Jewish restoration to this land and the fulfillment of prophecy and these end-time scenarios than you would find Christians concerned about a Christian presence in the land. And that's so disheartening for us. We say, let God take care of the second coming and whatever comes with it. And as Christians, we should be concerned with our mission, with helping one another, helping the church here continue, as you said, our mission of being light and soul. It breaks my heart to look at sometimes, and again, I pastor a small congregation in Bethlehem, and a few hundred, and in that congregation, many times I look at the pews, and many times, I think I see on a regular Sunday between 4 to 5 families where the parents are here, but the children have immigrated. And, it forces me to think 20 years from now, how will we continue to survive? And the lack of, as I said, concern that I see among many, many Christian leaders and Christian traditions about this is very disheartening. But at the end of the time, I think that Palestine have gone through worse times, maybe, over history, and God is faithful. So we have to continue to trust God's faithfulness. And those who come to Bethlehem will see, despite what I've described, a very engaged and very active Christian community, highly motivated. We're still, running our schools effectively. We're still, pray every Sunday we still preach the gospel every Sunday, preach the word of God. We have many excellent work done even by our young people, whether it's on social issues, on political issues, on faith-related issues. We're reaching out to our neighbors. We're building bridges with our Muslim community and even working together to achieve a better Palestinian society. So those who have stayed and those who are here from the Christian community are very determined and very motivated. We have a strong sense of calling, and I think right now, at least from my side, I think knowing that it's hard to change circumstances around us, as much as we try, what we can control is what we tell our young people, and what we can control is the message that we give. And right now, most of the things I preach about is the fact that we have a calling here. We need to stay because we're needed. We have a message to give. And as I said, many of us here, despite our small numbers, have embraced that message, embraced that calling. And I continue to be amazed by what God is doing through this small yet very influential Palestinian Christian community.
What's your prayer finally for Israel, Palestine?
I pray that we find ways to live together. I pray that the occupation is over. I pray that God liberates both Palestinians and Israelis, because I would argue that Israelis themselves are victims of their own oppression to the Palestinians. And I would pray that, I always say that what we pray for is what we work for. And one of the things we keep repeating here is that, yes, we want the occupation to end, but our goal is not simply to end the occupation, but to one day share this land with our neighbors. This means, I dream of a day in which my children will have Israeli friends, that they will have Jewish and Muslim friends. And it's toward that we need to work. And this is what we pray for. This is real peace. This is the real peace of God. This begins by ending the occupation. And so as I pray that God continues to be faithful to us, and I'm sure He is, as we are present here, but I also pray that circumstances will change and that the occupation will be over one day, and this will create possibility for a better future for both Palestinians and Israelis.
Okay, Munther, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.